Hi, Soha. Nice to see you.
Hi, Kaveri, how are you?
Good, good. So I think we're talking after a long time.
Yes,
It's been very interesting to see your career doing so well, and I loved you in Hush Hush. I
thank
thought it was
you.
lovely, and the trailer, of course, of Chhorii 2 looks pretty scary, which is what it's meant to be. So tell me a little about the role that you have and why you chose this as well.
I never really imagined that I would be an antagonist in a horror film
Yeah.
before.
An
But
antagonist first and then in a horror movie.
the antagonist, though, I could see now because I think all of us have darker aspects. Like, we think, could we really, if pushed, we could be capable of quite a lot. But I
Right.
feel like in a horror film, certainly to play a role like this, I just never thought that anyone would envision me
Yeah.
in this particular garb of somebody from a rural background with a rural
Yeah.
dialect, performing such vile actions, a moral fabric that is totally alien to me. And then the different forms that this character takes,
Yeah.
because you've seen her in posters and in the trailer as well, in a sort of almost normal look in a
Yeah.
ghagra and in a ghungat, and then you see a slightly more sinister look to her, and then you see an all-out monstrous look to her.
Right.
And that was quite prosthetic and VFX heavy. And I've never really done that. But I think the allure for an actor is to be presented in a way that people sort of notice you and
Yeah.
feel like, oh, whoa, that's an image. And I
Yeah.
thought, like, I would like to dress up and take 3 hours of prosthetics to be remembered like that, and to have that. And
Yeah.
then I was like, really? Do you really want to look like that? And I was like, yeah, I think I do want to look like that. And I might not get another chance to do all of
Yeah.
this, and dress up and wear a bald cap and do all of this. But, I'd like to. And I'm glad that I did. My fear was that it might be very tacky and I might look at it and go, this is cringe. But what I'm happy with is that, you know, Vishal sir, Vikram sir, our producer, our director, they have a vision which is quite high standard in terms of
Yeah.
horror. They wanted to really give some respect to the genre and elevate it. Such that the cinematography, the sound design, they have really spent a lot of time and a significant amount of money, I assume, on making it look good. So I'm quite proud of the way it's looking as well.
Yeah. And I think we underestimate, what it takes for an actor to do such roles because is it true that most of the time you're with a green screen or you're sort of the person opposite you is not there to sort of share your to share his or her reaction, so
Yes,
you're really working in isolation in a
yes,
way.
yes.
So it must be very tough, actually. We underestimate that,
No, it,
what
it
it
is
takes for that.
it is absolutely true, which is why I think it is very important to work very closely with your director. And that is why I think I enjoyed working with Vishal Furia because he took me through that. He said, of course, there's lots of times when it was literally me being wrapped in black fabric with lots of stickers on my face, which are necessary for VFX,
Right.
and being suspended from the ceiling. And,
God.
for like an hour, he would say, just open your mouth to various degrees. So either go ah or ah or ah and scream. And I have
Right.
no idea where this is going to be used in the film and what context, but you go with it. And I remember the end of that day, so I was hoarse for 3 days as well. And then at some
Yeah.
point, he was like, okay, actually, don't scream. We can do that later. Just open your mouth and we can do the sound later. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. But a lot of it comes in post production.
Right.
So it is a leap of faith in many ways. And you do have to really, I think out of the box in terms of,
Yeah.
okay, where is this happening in the film? What would be happening in the larger context so that you can
Yeah.
do your expressions accordingly? And then a lot of it you do leave, I think, in a genre like this to your director and hope that they know what they're doing. And in
Right.
this case, I was happy that he did.
Right. Talk about the action sequences as well. You talked about being suspended from, I presume it's safe enough, but I can imagine it's from a harness and you're
Yes.
there, sweating, or it's 30 minutes, an hour in a harness. Not easy, is it?
No, no, it is painful, it's uncomfortable, and they hang you sometimes from the ceiling. And what you can't do in this case was because I was wrapped up in like a sort of cocoon, my arms were wrapped up inside. So if, God forbid, they dropped me, I wouldn't have been able to protect my face. Or if they swung me too much, I was like,
Yeah,
please just don't crash me into a wall because I can't
right,
even do that.
right.
But they rehearsed it, to perfection before me. They harnessed someone else. They did work with stunt doubles, and they perfected it. And only in the end did they get me to come on set. And then it was, like clockwork. And of course, you have things that go wrong here and there, but there was nothing. I was very safe. There was a huge amount of trust, and I think that they that's when all the research and the pre-production, I think, pays off.
Yeah, right. And you talked about a leap of faith, both physically and metaphorically, I think. What was your concern, about doing a role like this?
I think my concern was A, that it would, as I said, look B grade. And we
Mm.
have seen some horror films or not seen some horror films because of the fact that we've thought, at least in the last 10, 15 years, that pure horror has not really been up to standard. And we watch so
Yeah,
much international content that is
exactly.
phenomenal and it
Yeah,
gets dubbed in all these languages that, you'd rather watch those. And in India, we see horror comedies and we see sort of, sexy horror films and not pure horror that is of a
yeah.
certain class or standing. And that was my concern, is that, these seem like very nice people and with all the good intentions, but will the execution be up to mark or not?
Mm.
And my comfort was certainly with Vikram sir, because we'd worked on Hush Hush together, him being
Yeah.
in Abhidanshya, and I trusted him,
I
and he
wish
said,
they do a sequel quickly, a
please,
second
please speak to
season.
Tanuja and please speak to him, and I hope they do.
Yeah,
But I felt that this is someone who does take his work seriously and
yeah,
does put his money where his mouth is, and if he's saying that this, he's got all these people involved from America, etc., etc., then
yeah,
this will work. They had all their references. I of course saw Chhorii 1, and I did like it very much in terms of plot and story. So
yeah.
I thought, here is a filmmaker also who knows how to tell a story. And then there was an element of leap of faith because they did say we're going to do a lot more to Chhorii 2. There's going to be more horror, there's going to be more prosthetics, there's going to be more scares, and that you're going to have to trust us on.
Right. It looks very intense.
Do
I'm
you
not
like
a
horror
great
yourself? Do you?
I was about to say I'm not a great horror fan, but of late I've started actually developing an interest in it, and I'm surprised with my interest. And I think it through horror. I was discussing it with Vishal yesterday and with Vikram in a conversation. I think through horror you can actually say a lot of things that you cannot otherwise,
Yes,
especially in the world that we're living in. So I think that's a very interesting aspect of horror, and I wonder whether you felt that as well. There's
I
a lot of
did.
social commentary that you can do which you cannot
Absolutely.
perhaps do otherwise.
You're right. And what Vishal said in an interview we were doing together was interesting. He said, actually, the idea of making it a horror is to soften the blow,
Yeah,
because if you read things in the newspaper, and if I was to shoot that and show it to you as is, you would not be able to digest that, you would not be able to
exactly.
take that. But if I create an artificial world, and if I say there's this fictional cult and there's this fictional priestess who practices all these things that don't actually take place and they're all supernatural, and the evil things that they do happen in some place in my imagination, then you sort of watch it and say, oh, this is beautiful and this is
Yeah,
so
correct.
scary, but it's so far removed
Yeah,
from our lives. But actually, if you strip away all of that, and if you come down to it, and if you, like at the end of Chhorii 1, where they show you the statistics of
yeah,
female feticide, female infanticide, then you realize that is the real horror, that these things take
absolutely.
place, and they don't just take place in faraway places,
Oh no, in
by
our
people.
neighborhoods.
They take place in our
Yeah.
neighborhoods. Vishal himself has spoken about his actual literal neighbors, who, and people who these things have happened to, or even people who have a certain mindset, which is baffling, where there's still this huge preference for a male son, a male heir, which certainly as a daughter and as a mother to a daughter, I find baffling.
Absolutely. But we know that these things exist and we know
Yes.
that they're right there. I mean, they're literally monsters under our beds.
Yes.
And you just have to read the newspapers to know
Yes.
what's happening. And so it's really terrifying, actually, the kind of violence we're, inflicting on each other. I think as someone who, not just a mother, but a concerned citizen, I'm sure that worries you as well.
Oh, absolutely, it worries me. I feel like people get very angry very quickly.
Yeah,
I often feel it might stem from something else, perhaps, unemployment, perhaps inflation, perhaps rising costs, perhaps the state of our roads. I don't know where it stems from, but there's so much pent up frustration, anger,
rage. Yeah, yeah,
and it's that's what I'm saying. It's not just a lack of education or awareness.
yeah,
There's so many reasons why people are angry, and the easiest target is a woman.
yeah.
Who is perceived as the weaker sex, who is perceived as a victim, who is perceived as eternally suffering. And it's not always violence in the form of physical violence or the social evils that we've seen perpetrated over the years of, dowry
Dowry debt.
deaths,
Yeah,
or
I mean,
widow
this,
burning, or etc. etc. Some of it
yeah,
is the stuff that you find difficult to even fight against, which is the casual misogyny,
yeah.
which is just the labeling and the expectation and the conditioning that a woman should be a certain way and a man should be a certain way, the mansplaining, there's so much of it that is happening on a very insidious level.
Talking about casual misogyny, how much of that do you still face in the industry? We know it's out there in society, of course, but I find that at least there is a certain, uh, shall I say, freedom or a certain liberty that comes to women after a certain age as well,
Yes.
and I think in a way, it's been quite liberating for some of you who could maybe just 20 years ago have, maybe not have had jobs. But
Yeah.
it's wonderful to see all of you having good careers and
Yeah.
not, yeah, I mean, maybe not working all the time, but
Yeah.
when you do, you get good parts. And
Yes.
you can afford to wait for those good parts
Yes.
as well. I think
Yes.
that is much more important. So talk a little about aging. And as a society, we're getting to be concerned about aging as well. We know we're not forever young. So, especially for women, it's such a big thing, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge thing because, women are, especially on screen and off screen, um, I find are the more attractive of the two genders, and I feel like a lot of one's confidence, sense of happiness comes from when we're having a good day,
Yeah.
our hair, our skin,
Just
how
a good hair day.
just a good hair day makes such a difference. Compliments, whether we like it or not, and we say our validation doesn't come
Yeah.
from anywhere else. I feel like how we look in some way does affect how we feel.
Yeah.
Um,
For
but
sure.
I feel it also comes from the absence of wonderful, strong, secure women role models who are
Yeah.
aging gracefully.
Yeah.
The images that we're surrounded by are of women who are strong and who are empowered, but who are spending a lot of money to look young and to
Yeah.
appear young and to be young, and who have the ability to do that. A lot of people don't have the finances to do that.
Yeah.
The idea is not
It's
to
an
judge people.
expensive
It
business.
is very expensive, so the idea is not to judge people for what they're doing, each to their
Yeah.
own. But
Yeah.
it becomes problematic when you are a role model to other people who
Yeah.
are young and impressionable, especially when I'm talking about teenage girls who feel the need, therefore, to go on diets or to lose weight or to put on weight or to look a certain way that is considered attractive or appealing. And this is not
Or
just in, yeah,
culturally in vogue.
culturally in vogue, and they may not want to be actors. This is now just
Yeah.
normal people who are
Yeah.
just on Instagram and
Yeah.
just going to college. But the pressure to look a certain way is so much that it's having an impact on these minds from a very young age. So that concerns me again as the mother to a young daughter.
Yeah.
And the idea, I think, is to really try to put yourself out there in the realest way that you can.
Possible way. Yeah.
And we've turned in Hollywood, there are many examples.
Yeah.
Kate Winslet is one of my favorites,
Oh,
who's
yes.
spoken a lot about this.
He's spoken
Um,
so much about the body image, you know,
yeah,
and
and she's talked about how much goes into creating that red carpet look.
yeah,
And back home, you have Karina, who even
yeah,
more recently has been talking about the fact that she has embraced the way that she looks, and she wants to age, saws, Botox, and this and that.
right. Your
Um,
mom, Soha,
my mom has, used one kind of pot of uh, cold cream her whole life and has had no other beauty regimen
which
since.
one is that? Is it
I
Pond's
don't
or
want to
Milka?
say, but at some point I think it was oil of Olay, and now I think I put a picture, and I think there was a Pond's or a Nivea
Okay.
that was on her side table, and that and some tail that she takes off her makeup with, and there's nothing else that she's ever done.
And just look at her. She's so lovely.
Yeah, and she's so lovely. So I think that if you're surrounded by the right voices,
Yeah,
people who say,
yeah,
you don't need to have a nose job, you don't need to
yeah,
do this, you're fine the way you are, then why
yeah,
would you ever put yourself through the pain and
yeah.
torture of doing all those things
And
to
these are all high maintenance things. Once you
very
do
high
them, you have to keep
maintenance?
doing them.
Yes, yes, I know. And it doesn't all look the same forever.
Yeah, yeah. But I think, do you find that you're also enjoying yourself much more? Because as you age, obviously, you get better at your craft and you get better, you're more confident of your self-image, and you can actually say pretty much what you want as well within certain limitations and do pretty
Yeah.
much what you want.
Yes, well, let's put those limitations in. Yes, I don't know if all of us can say exactly what we want at all times, but
Yeah,
I certainly feel like in my 40s,
yeah,
I now, the things that I pretended to do earlier, like I would pretend to have a drink, because people would be like, oh, hey, just have a drink. And I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
enjoy drinking. And now I just say, no, I don't want to.
yeah. Right.
I go to bed at 10 o'clock,
Yeah,
and I have no social life at night anymore, and I don't pretend now that I want to do anything else except for get my 8 hours of sleep, wake up in the morning and
right.
work out, because my
Yeah,
health and my fitness are a priority for me right now.
right.
I want to be able to be the best that I can be and to be able to function independently for many, many decades still, and I know that that requires that kind of investment now. And certainly when it comes to the things that I want to eat, the way that I want to dress, the work that I'd like to do, if something offends me, I'm generally a non-confrontational person. I don't like to speak up. I'll generally sort of find my way of doing what I want to, and I'm more diplomatic about it. But I found with me and with a lot of my friends around me, especially those who are women, we're finding our voices and we're
Yeah.
saying, no, this is wrong. This is not humorous, certainly, for you to say this. And you're calling people out now. And people are doing that. And I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah. Does it make you lose work?
I think that there is a sense, because a lot of the world is still, the decisions are still being made by men.
Yeah.
And I do feel when you become very vocal, then people say, oh, she talks a lot, but
Yeah.
she's
Oh,
constantly this
she's
feminist.
difficult.
Yeah, and just it becomes, it's hard to take, and you're not a team player, and you're not just making things easy, and therefore you might find that somebody who's more easygoing is given the
Yeah.
job as opposed to someone else. Um,
It still happens, right?
I think it still happens, not only in social settings as well. You may be invited to fewer dinners,
Yeah.
or you might be set up with, like, oh, you'll be like, oh, no, no, I don't want to suggest that girl for you because, she's a bit of a feminist, and she's like,
Yeah.
does a lot of chick chick, and, they're constantly like, so you're like, okay. So, I think that still definitely exists.
Yeah. But I guess you get to do also things that you love. And I guess at some point I see you also directing and writing, perhaps. And I'm sure
I
that
don't
will
think I'll ever,
happen.
I really don't think I'll ever direct, because I do think that that involves, it's a whole different skill set where you have
Yeah.
to really, I mean, I've seen Kunal direct in
Yeah.
recent times, and he was born, I think, to tell stories
Right.
in the written form and to direct. And he's really, I think, flourishing in that. For me, it's more about acting. And now I'm actually putting together a podcast, which I know
Oh,
everybody and their grandmothers is. But I'm excited about mine because I feel like as a woman in her 40s, I have lots of questions. And I don't
yeah.
think that there's one credible, reliable place to get some answers to. So I'm trying to create that conversation. with hopefully some like
Oh,
interesting, cool people and have some really meaningful conversations. So now I'm also spending some time doing that.
wonderful. I look forward to that. And I look forward to watching you scare the hell out of all of
Yes,
us.
please see it and tell us what you think.
I will. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking to you and all the best.
Thank you, Kaveri ji.
Bye.
Bye.
You too, ma'am. Thank you.